I have been on the hunt for platinum for about the last 2 or 3 months, and if you've been watching the metals market, it's probably not surprising. Platinum has actually come down in price quite a bit from where it was, and all the rest of the metals seem to be kind of high. My own personal ratio of gold to silver to platinum has been skewed pretty heavily in the last, probably year or so, because I've picked up so many fascinating and beautiful vintage silver bars, but that has the unexpected consequence of it kind of skewing those ratios. And I don't keep my ratios. That's the percentage, kind of the number of gold ounces to silver ounces, and some people include platinum and anything else that you want to throw in there. I don't keep those ratios rock solid. It's not really that important to me because I know that things kind of fluctuate over time. It's really not that critical, but I don't want to get too far out of whack. And recently, I've been pretty far out of whack. So I've been on the hunt for platinum, and with very little luck. That's one of the problems of being who I am, is that I stack kind of interesting stuff. But I had an opportunity to pick up a little platinum a little while ago, and as much as I want to make this video about platinum, it's actually not going to be about platinum. It's about something else. Isn't that always the way it seems to work out? Whenever you think you have closed a door or opened that window, another one opens. So this video is actually going to be about originality. So I'll try to make this as interesting as possible. I know some people probably just rolled their eyes, but bear with me. I think this is kind of an interesting journey, and I think it can be beneficial if you want to augment the potential value of your stack without shelling out any extra money for it. If you are new to the channel, my name is Dub C. I want to thank you for being with me here today. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, and if you've watched a couple of my videos, I'd like to encourage you. Go ahead and click on that subscription button. It doesn't cost anything. You just kind of get added to the number of people that I premiere videos to, and click on that notification also. That way you can actually see when new videos come out. I try to premiere new videos on Friday evenings, so hopefully, and I try to be there when I'm premiering those videos, live streaming kind of, so you can ask me questions and you can chat with me if you want to, say hi to other folks that are in the stacking community. And it's just kind of a nice way to build a community. If you are one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys as always, especially if you're one of those folks that comes to those premieres. I like having the opportunity to see people react to the videos that I'm making. It's really kind of gratifying to see the responses to it, good and bad. So I want to thank you for being here with me again today too. If you're new to the channel, I do like to begin my videos with a simple disclaimer, and that is that I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And I also like to begin my videos with a definition or two that we kind of work back into the subject that we're talking about. I'm going to hit on several different definitions throughout this video. It doesn't really seem like it lends itself with just giving you a dictionary definition at the beginning of the video, but the one thing that this video is about is originality. And I've touched on originality a little bit recently, and I know several other YouTubers are kind of going down that same path. And really, what I hope kind of sets my YouTube channel maybe a little bit apart from some of the other folks out there who do what we do, is that I come to precious metal stacking from being a coin collector. So coin collecting going back 30 or 40 years, really closer to 50 years. And in my teens, I really started to stack precious metals in earnest. It's a natural extension, I think, of coin collecting. So I've been stacking precious metals for many decades now, and hopefully you can learn from my experience and hopefully be entertained with some of my amusing and painful anecdotes from when I was a young stacker. But it is those attributes that we look for in coins that I have kind of shifted to precious metal stacking. And honestly, I think you can pick up bits and pieces from even other hobbies. For example, I'll brush really, really gently against the idea of sports cards and comic books in this video, because I think it really all comes down to the core idea of that originality. That's what makes certain pieces that we are able to pick up more interesting. Before I really dive headfirst into it, I just want to make it absolutely and abundantly clear that if you are the type of precious metal stacker who stacks rolls of silver eagles, or generic Scottsdale Mint, or Silvertown, or Germania, or Royal Mint, or whatever else it is, There's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with accumulating pieces that are easy to buy, easy to sell, easy to understand. It does take a little bit of extra effort sometimes to pick up the more unusual pieces, and it can be a little bit exhausting, especially if it's not really something you're interested in. So I just want to make it clear that if you are the type of person that stacks generic rounds, or you like a consistent stack of nothing but Canadian maples, nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's great too. It has its own special positive attributes, and I applaud anybody who has decided that this is a journey that they want to go down. I'm fond of saying that this is a very, very personal journey. Your stack can often reflect who you are, and I think that's one of the coolest things about precious metals, that each of us has a slightly different story and a slightly different perspective. But that's enough rambling on. Let's get into it. So I've been on the hunt for platinum. And being who I am, it needs to be a little bit interesting. So I have been asking my local dealers. I didn't really want to go online to pursue this. If you see anything interesting in platinum, set it aside. And when I come back in, I'll pick it up. And I have had zero luck with it. And then about a month ago, I happened to remind one of my local dealers that I was still on the hunt for platinum. And they said, "Oh yeah, I've got something. I set it aside for you. And that's what this is." So we'll talk about this in just a second. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background on what made this piece so interesting to me in the form of that originality that we talked about. I had an opportunity to have a live stream a little while ago, and one of the topics that came up during that live stream, and that's just an opportunity for subscribers and viewers to interact with me live, ask me questions and so forth. And we came upon the My Core collection. I have a very specific style of collecting, and I mentioned that one of the pieces that is not in my collection that I'm very keen on eventually buying is the 1915 Pan Pac $50 octagonal gold piece. This is a mouthful, but I think this is one of the most beautiful coins that America has ever made. In the background on this is that in the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s, America had a series of what we call World's Fairs. You may have been to one in the 80s or even 90s, but these were kind of a big deal and happened about every 5 years, give or take, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, up until about 1930. And these World's Fairs were fairs in the kind of the most common vernacular. This was an opportunity for regular common folks to pay a small admission fee and be let loose on these multi-acre, sometimes 100-acre grounds with all sorts of rides and refreshments and live music and live acts and rodeos and everything else you can think of that would be entertaining. But it was also an opportunity for businesses to display their wares. I like to think of the World's Fairs as kind of the internet before the internet. If you were the type of business that services other industry, other businesses, then especially if you're the kind of person or business that makes, big equipment, farming equipment or mining equipment, ships or whatever else it is, you can't really send samples around the world to let people look at it. But what you can do is have your customers come to you. So these world fairs were an opportunity for you to have an exhibit, for you to display your merchandise, your scientific equipment, your new drugs or whatever it was, and have your customers from all around the world come and look at your items. This was a really, really great opportunity to expand your business. And these fairs would go on for months. The example of the 1915 Panama Pacific Fair that happened in San Francisco, that went on from February through December of 1915. So you get an idea. These things serviced millions of people. Millions of people passed through the gates and were entertained thoroughly. But again, it was an opportunity for business to kind of display their wares. And in 1915, the city of San Francisco had suffered devastating fires and earthquakes in 1906. So this was really an opportunity to show the rest of the world that they had, in fact, recovered from the fires and earthquakes, and that they were once again one of America's most dazzling cities, especially one of the cities on the West Coast. San Francisco, it is close to the California gold rush areas, and it has always been kind of closely tied to that. So in 1915, the U.S. Mint in San Francisco took the opportunity to make special coins for the Panama Pacific Exposition. Pan Pac is what most people call it, and it was really designed to showcase the fact that we had finished or had nearly finished the Panama Canal, the opportunity to unite the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans with a much shorter passage period for shipping and everything else, But really, it was all about San Francisco. This was really an opportunity for San Francisco to shine. So the San Francisco Mint took that opportunity and made special commemorative coins. They made a $50. They made a gold dollar, a gold $2.50 piece. Those are beautiful pieces in their own right. But then they made these massive $50 gold pieces. This is not something that America had ever done, at least had never really issued before. So these commemoratives were definitely different. And there is a long history with these World's Fairs having kind of a breeding ground for coins and metals. In fact, some of the earliest metals that were ever made in the United States were the result of the World's Fairs in 1876. But in 1892, 1893 in Chicago, there was also the World's Columbian Exposition. That was the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus discovering America, but really a chance for Chicago to shine and show the world that it was a major city for industry, for science, and everything else. And really one of the first commemorative coins ever made in the United States, actually the first commemorative coin ever made in the United States, were the Columbian Exposition $50. You may have seen these before. One side designed by Charles Barber, one side designed by George Morgan. How is that for rich, steeped in numismatic history in the United States? They're really pretty coins, kind of common. They're not difficult to find. Really, really high-grade examples are beautiful, and these pieces tone beautifully also. So there is a rich history of these World's Fairs kind of incubating coins. The Isabella quarter was also issued, and that's a commemorative quarter, issued at the Columbian Exposition in 1893 in Chicago. So both of those first American commemorative coins issued at these World's Fairs. Just like the 1915 Panama Pacific pieces. Now, the Panama Pacific gold pieces, I don't want to go too deep into it, but again, we're talking about originality, and bear with me, I think you're going to totally get this. You could have bought these pieces, these beautiful 50-cent, $1, $2.50, and $50 gold pieces, and they made it in the $50 gold piece in both a round version and an octagonal version, and that's what really makes those pieces so eye-catching. The U.S. Mint struck, we think, about 1,500 examples of each of those big $50 gold pieces. But as you can imagine, back in 1915, $50 was a lot of money, but that's not how much they cost you. These pieces essentially cost double their face value. That's how the mint was making its money at the fair. So if you wanted a $50 gold piece, you had to shell over $100, shell out $100. In 1915, that was a ton of money. So not many people bought them. So even though we struck 1,500 examples of both the round and the octagonal version, almost all of them got melted and destroyed at the end of the fair. They just hadn't sold very well. The famous numismatist Ferran Zerbi was kind of responsible for selling these pieces at the fair, and he had difficulty getting people into the booth. It wasn't originally part of the American numismatic organizations, the U.S. Mint's pieces, so he was trying to sell them in different places, and he eventually took several copies of these pieces back with him to his shops to try to sell them, and I understand it took him years to finally get rid of these pieces. These just did not sell well, and it's mind-boggling now when you see these pieces, because these have become some of the most important treasures of American numismatics. If you bought one of these pieces, let's say you bought the $50 round piece back in 1915 at the World's Fair, it would have cost you $100. Those pieces now sell anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000. You can see that these have become incredibly rare and incredibly sought after. That's why I mentioned it. This is one of those pieces that I've always had on my bucket list, one of the things that I would like to have eventually, and I believe I eventually will have one. But think about it. If you wanted to buy an example of each of those pieces, and the Mint did sell these complete sets back in 1915, so you got the 50 cent, the dollar, the $2.50, and both of those $50 pieces, the round and the octagonal. They sold those sets, and they were in excess of $250 to buy these sets. But when you think about that in terms of money in the 2020s, that was $6,000 or $7,000 in our money that you would have to buy or spend to get these pieces back in 1915. So this was an enormous amount of money, and it was probably really only something that big institutions bought. This wasn't, the average person couldn't have dropped that kind of cash at the fair to buy that complete set. But the Mint offered these complete sets in a beautiful leather pouch that had a little snap on it, and you can fold it open and you can see little detailed information about each of those coins. So once again, that was the 50 cent, the dollar, the $2.50, and both of the $50 gold pieces in a beautiful little leather pouch. And the mint also offered these sets in a beautiful copper frame. Each one of these sets kind of had crushed velvet backgrounds with gold lettering. So the framed pieces were suitable for actually putting on your wall. This became something that you displayed. I suspect that they were probably bought by like big investment firms back on the East Coast, back in New York or Boston, Philadelphia. These were the kind of things that bank president up on the higher floor would have on his office wall. This was not really the kind of thing that an average person could afford. But some people were able to buy these complete sets. And if you were fortunate enough to be able to have these sets and to put them aside for the next 100 years, because really these came out 110, 120 years ago, you had something that was incredibly special. And if you were the kind of person that was a little bit specific about how you stored these sets, the Mint did release little pamphlets that came along with them, little envelopes that contained these sets, that you would put over the frame to protect it while it's being shipped. Maybe even little pouches that each one of the coins came in so they wouldn't be damaged while they were being shipped to your big bank back in New York City. Did you keep those? Would you have kept those? Because it's that originality, the little pieces of ephemera that these came with, that really sets these aside. Now, these sets were spectacular in their own right. These are really, like I said, treasures of American numismatics. And a lot of the frames got lost or destroyed. A lot of the leather pouches got lost or destroyed. As you can imagine, 100 years, you've gone through the First World War, the Great Depression, the Second World War, and everything else that's happened since then. To have kept these sets in their original pouches, in their original boxes, however they were displayed. And if you were one of those people that kept the little original envelopes that came along with it, the little pieces of paper that described what these sets were, then you had something that was exceptionally rare and exceptionally original. And a few of these sets have come up for auction recently and have sold in excess of $250,000. That's how scarce these are. In fact, the copper frames or the little leather pouches that these coins came in sometimes sell without the coins included and still sell for thousands of dollars. That's that originality. Now, these sets were spectacular, but the pieces that came along with them, the frames or whatever else it was, didn't cost anything or didn't cost very much anyway. The envelopes that they came in, the little pieces of paper that said what they were, none of this cost anything. This was all just part of the packaging materials that came along with these sets. It's the people that had the foresight to preserve those pieces, to really make these sets exceptional, that sets them apart. And that's where the dividends come in. That's where the money comes in. That's why these sets sell in excess of $250,000. It's that originality. So you get kind of the idea of what I'm talking about and why I was excited to see this set being offered. I do have one example I wanted to share with you just so you get an idea. It is not anywhere like the Pan Pac $50 gold piece, but it does have a little bit of that originality. You get an idea of what it is that I am after when I'm looking for these pieces. And maybe you'll be after the same kind of originality from when you go look for these pieces in the future. You're looking at this red box here. I hope this is a beautiful box. Universal Exposition 1904, St. Louis. What is this? Well, there was another World's Fair in 1904, the Louisiana Purchase. This was the 100th anniversary of the Louisiana Purchase that happened in 1804. And it happened in St. Louis, kind of the heart of the Louisiana Purchase, and it was very French themed. And remember that the Louisiana Purchase we bought from the French. So there was kind of an ongoing French theme along with it. So I was looking for one of the medals. This is a medal that was given to one of the exhibitors at that exposition in 1904. And I had an opportunity to buy several of them, but I took my time and I finally pulled the trigger when it came to this one. Why? Well, I like the original box, and you can see that even though it's got a little bit of foxing on the edges, it's still 100% intact. This is over 100 years old too, 120 years this year. So to have a cardboard box that's 120 years old, still in great condition, I don't know, does it sound boring? Does that sound tedious? To me, that's really exciting. But you open it up, and you see this satin-lined top and the crushed velvet lined box here. Note this little piece of paper. We'll talk about that again in just a moment. And this is one of the awards that was given to one of the exhibitors. If that eagle looks a little bit familiar, that's because this eagle was designed by Adolf Weinman. If his name sounds familiar, why? That's why we have both the Walking Liberty and the Mercury or Winged Liberty dimes and half dollars here. Adolf Weinman was the person that designed the Walking Liberty half dollar that eventually became the design that we have on the Silver Eagle. You see how closely tied American numismatics were to these World's Fairs. We already talked about Morgan and Barber being the ones that designed the Columbian Exposition half dollar. Now we've got Weinman, who designed the Walking Liberty half dollar, the Mercury dime, and eventually the American Silver Eagle, was the designer of the medals that were given out to the exhibitors at this World's Fair in 1904. So satin lined top, you've got crushed velvet box, you've got this beautiful, interesting shaped medal, beautiful design there. But what drew me to this piece more than that were these two pieces of paper. The first one you saw down below. And this is just an explanation of what these medals are. And if you look really closely, you can actually see that this one has Adolf Weinman's name on it. But more important than that, who was responsible for the overall exhibition in terms of its artistic merit? Well, it was Augustus St. Gaudens. You can see his name right there. Probably the most important designer of American coins. Again, having this unique tie to the World's Fairs, you can really see how important it was. I mentioned this really thin piece of paper that's just on the verge of deteriorating. What makes this really special and why I wanted this one in particular, the originality of this set. It's in French, which again is a little bit of an affectation. This whole thing was very French themed. But what this says essentially is that the diploma will be sent later free of charge. What does that mean? When you were an exhibitor at one of these exhibitions and you won a prize, they didn't have these medals made for everybody. In fact, there's some evidence to suggest that you might have actually had to pay for the physical medal. But you still got a big certificate showing that you had won. And they call these certificates, these paper awards, diplomas. And I'll show an example from the 1904 exhibition in St. Louis. This is an example of one of those diplomas given out to somebody who won the prize. They didn't even have these diplomas ready to go, right? They had to get your booth number and your name on it, and it had to be shipped to you at a later date. So that's what this piece of paper is saying. It's, you have won one of these prizes, and we will ship that diploma to you at a later date. How many of these pieces were saved, do you reckon? How many people packed up their booth at an exhibition in 1904, loaded it on the back of a train or a wagon or a horse-drawn carriage, and took it back to wherever they came from? How many of these little tiny slips of paper were lost? You know, it's that originality that drew me to the set. The beauty of the design, the fact that it's an Adolf Weinman design who designed all of the 4 medals that were given away at this exposition. But it's really that originality, because there have to be so few of these little silly slips of paper that are left over. And I showed a little slip of paper from the 1915. This is that little silly slip of paper from the 1904 in my medals instance. And I'll show you a little silly slip of paper in this box now. So I'm on the hunt for platinum. You get the idea that I'm looking for something that is as original and interesting as possible, and that's where this piece comes into play. I go to my local shop. They said, yes, we've actually got something. You might be interested in this. Now, as soon as I saw the box, I knew that this is Royal Canadian Mint, and you can see it says Royal Mint on it too. This plastic bag is actually very rigid. This is a thick, heavyweight plastic bag. Am I really excited about the plastic bag? I am a little bit, because it's that originality, right? How many of these sets still have the original plastic bag they came in? Now, if it was just a generic plastic bag, didn't say anything on it, I might not be so excited by it. But the fact that this actually says Royal Mint on it in great big bold letters, that is definitely something that came from the Royal Canadian Mint. This is original packaging. This is interesting to me. So we'll set that aside. But the box itself, this is a nice rigid box. I know, silly, right? We're talking about the edges, but remember I talked about the edges of this box from 1904, and it has kind of the same importance. The key thing to remember about this is that it doesn't cost you anything, but try to get the highest quality and most original piece that you can. The box is in fantastic shape, but when you open the box, and I won't display the insides yet, what immediately I thought of when I opened this up, and I realized you probably can't see it on video, but this is a crushed velvet backer to the inside of this box. the Royal Canadian Mint decided that what was inside this box was important enough that they wanted to protect it. And I would never even thought of that, to make the inside of the box kind of a crushed velvet that really protects that which is within the box. And then here's the big reveal. The reason why they wanted to protect it is this is a beautiful hardwood case with probably wood burned image on it. You guys who do that as a hobby might be able to fill me in. Maybe it's just some kind of etching. Maybe it's laser engraved. 1979, 1989. What is this? Well, this is a small anniversary set celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Canadian gold maple leaf. And before we get into it, here's the bottom of that box. It also has that crushed velvet, right? So this is really kind of a nice thing. Beautiful edges, no markings, there's no stickers on it. This is about as original of one of these boxes as you're gonna find. Of course, we're interested in what this actually is. So 1979, Canada saw the writing on the wall with the gold Krugerrand. Really, if you were buying gold back in the 1970s, you essentially had two choices. You had the Austrian Corona, 100 Corona, which is a really nice big coin, but it's not pure gold, and it's not a full troy ounce. This is kind of an old school bullion play. These were restrikes for the most part, so there's no numismatic value to these pieces, the Coronas, and their corresponding silver vehicles. Anyone? The Maria Theresa Thaler, right? We've talked about the MT Thalers quite a bit. But just like the Maria Theresa Thaler, it's not a full troy ounce, and it's not pure metals. The Thaler is not pure silver, the Corona not pure gold. So these were a little bit cumbersome. And they're kind of old school, but the Krugerrand, the South African Krugerrand, kind of made strides to what the future of these precious metals pieces was going to be. The South African Krugerrand, 1 troy ounce of pure gold, right? That's getting us much closer to what we expect to see when we're looking at modern gold pieces. Now, the Krugerrand is only 22 karat gold, but it weighs more than enough to account for that alloy, that copper alloy, to make it a full troy ounce of pure gold in the form of a 22 karat gold coin. But Canada kind of saw the writing on the wall, and part of that writing was because of apartheid. The South African government was an oppressive government, and because of that, countries all over the world boycotted South African exports, and one of the main things to get hit was the Krugerrand. It became illegal to import them, and in some countries, illegal to even own Krugerrands. So Canada decided to take it upon themselves to make a gold coin that would compete directly with the Krugerrand, and Canada made it out of pure gold. So now you have a modern 1 troy ounce pure gold vehicle that would be much closer to what we are used to now here in the 2020s. And Canada saw the writing on the wall too, and knew that the idea of releasing a silver coin would be important too. 1988, Canada releases the first silver maple. So now we have gold and silver, and Canada is taking the opportunity to make a set that celebrates the 10-year anniversary of the Krugerrand by making this beautiful set. Now, this set does come in fractional gold pieces, and there's also 1 ounce pieces of the gold maple, the silver maple, and the platinum maple. That's not this. So my dealer was proud enough to show this to me, and I was definitely interested in it. What we have here is the 1989 full troy ounce silver, 10th ounce gold, and 10th ounce platinum. All of these in proof. Proof is not condition. Remember that proof is actually a manufacturing method. It makes a really beautiful coin that is the kind of thing that a lot of collectors like. I actually look for high-grade uncirculated myself most of the time. But just check this out, the proofs, the regular strikes for the 1989 silver maple. The Royal Mint made 3 million of them. They made 30,000 of the proofs, and the corresponding small numbers for the gold pieces as well. So these are already kind of rare pieces on top of being something that was made 35 years ago. So this was a long time ago. But it's the originality, right? That's what I'm really after. The box is beautiful. It looked like it had never even been opened when I first opened it up. And it comes with this beautiful trifold certificate of authenticity with this beautiful engraved or punched shield of Canada. So everything that you'd want about this is all of that originality is just screaming at you. But there's a silly little piece of paper up here. What does this piece of paper say? It essentially says that in order to take the coins out, you press down on the top and it lifts up the edge. That's really all it says. That silly little piece of paper. It's both French and English. the kind of thing that the first time you open this set up, you would have looked at it and thrown it in the garbage, right? Who would have kept the silly little paper that says that you put your thumb on this and push it down in order to get the coins out? Who would have kept the silly little piece of paper that said that the diploma was in the mail and you don't have to pay anything for it? That originality doesn't cost anything. It came with the sets originally, but it is one of the things that separates and keeps these pieces different than all the rest of them. I like to talk about attrition a lot on this channel. That's just the idea that over time, pieces get lost, pieces get damaged, pieces get destroyed, they get thrown away, they get stolen, they get melted down. That really impacts the finite numbers of collectibles, especially those pieces that were never really meant to be collected in the first place. Now, this is maybe a little bit more collectible than some of the pieces that I take. But I think the originality of this speaks for itself. Even that silly little bag that came with it that says the Royal Canadian Mint or the Royal Mint on it really sets this aside. But there's one other piece that came along with it that just kind of sealed the deal for me. If you have seen my channel recently, I've talked several times about the great big precious metals wholesaler in New York called Manfra, Tordello and Brooks, MTB. And they were a big distributor in the 1980s. This was the kind of place that if you were a sovereign country and you needed a steady supply of silver, thousands and thousands of ounces to make silver coins, you would contract with a company like MTB. But in the 1980s, they were jumping on that consumer bandwagon, also releasing pieces that were designed for just the average consumer, just the average Joe on the street, people like you and me. And these are examples of these silver bars that MTB designed, and these were actually struck by Johnson Matthey and Engelhard and a few others. But you can see the big MTB oval logo on these on the back. Keep that in mind. So this was definitely one of the biggest players in consumer bullion at the time. And when my dealer showed this set to me, they went back in the back and came back with another thing that came along with the set that they hadn't put out in their little display case, and it was this. What is this? This is another one of those silly little folded pieces of paper. So what makes this interesting, beside the fact that it came with the original credit card receipt and that person's credit card number who bought this, was that this paper receipt that was filled out in December of 1989 actually came from MTB. So this is an original receipt from MTB in New York City for this, a 35-year-old receipt, an invoice for this exact set that lists all the particulars about it. Now, sure, some people may have kept these, but the number of people that kept the original receipt with that original plastic bag, the original outer case, the original inner case, the original certificate of authenticity, those original little cointainer capsules that each one of these pieces came in, and that silly little slip of paper that says push down on it with your thumb to get these coins out. Are there more sets out there that are that original? Probably not. Am I being psychotic by wanting this much information, all of these little pieces stuck together? Probably. But when you think about those sets from 1915, or you think about this beautiful metal from 1904, the thing that really sets those ones aside are the people that kept those silly little pieces of paper, those silly little things that came along with it, that really make those sets as original and whole as they can possibly be. I was sold. I paid the money. And even though this only adds 1/10 of a troy ounce of platinum to my stack, and I really needed a lot more than that, I was thrilled to get this set. One more aside, you can find these pieces online. You can look at eBay and you can see the individual pieces, the silver, the gold, the platinum. And some people have actually gotten these certified by NGC or PCGS. And I suppose I could probably do that, but that would add $30 roughly per coin. And I don't know if I would gain much by it. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like all of the bits and pieces that come along with it, I totally get it. It can be consuming and it does take up a little bit more space. But one of the nice things about this set in particular is that this set, all with its beautiful hardwood box, laser engraved, the outer box, the little receipts and everything else, it doesn't take up much more space than those 3 slabs would take up if you had those individual pieces slabbed by a company like NGC. In the 1990s and 2000s, the United States Mint put out more and more elaborate sets for their gold pieces in particular. Those pieces do become cumbersome. Those are kind of hard to keep all the original ephemera that came with those. And yet I still do. So originality, what do you think about it? Is it ridiculous? Am I being psychotic? Is it way too much? Or do you kind of get that if you've got the capacity, the mental capacity, the storage capacity, and everything else, to keep all of these pieces, even these original receipts that came with these at the kind of the height of that precious metal consumer boom that happened in the 1980s. This is really kind of an exciting thing to me. And again, through attrition over the years, fewer and fewer of these sets remain intact. Fewer and fewer of them have the original box, the original COA, but very few of them have those outer bags and even that original receipt from MTB in New York. And I think all of that adds to the originality, keeps this piece just a little bit more interesting. And again, it doesn't cost anything. If you can find these pieces that come with all of this and it doesn't cost you anything else, your ability to store these for the next 10, 15, 20 years, maybe a little bit more, could add to the value of these sets without you even having to shell out a single penny. It's all just about keeping them in good condition and avoiding that attrition. Let me know what your thoughts are about this. Let me know if I'm crazy. Let me know if you do this also. If you don't have the time to even worry about it, I get it. If you have questions about any things we talked about here, from the medal to the 1915 Panama Pacific, I need to correct myself, the Panama Pacific exhibition in 1915 in San Francisco. If you've got questions about the Weinman coins, leave those questions down below. I'd be happy to answer them. Believe me, if you've got a question, there's a good chance that somebody else has that question also. Let's go ahead and answer it for everybody. If you have suggestions or comments that you'd like to see me make additional videos or video series even touching on anything else dealing with coins or precious metals, leave that comment down below. I'll take a look and see if I've got the expertise, the experience, and the examples that we can use. Maybe we can bang out an entire series, and I'll definitely give you a shout out if we do that. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, go ahead and click on that subscription button. Love to have you be part of this community. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as we go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.